Hello and welcome to another episode of the PropSwap podcast. We are your hosts, Ian Epstein
and Luke Pergande.
And we are also the founders of PropSwap, the first marketplace to buy and sell sports bets. Thank you so much for joining us this week. We've got another great episode for you. We'll go over some big sales from the weekend. We'll talk about some rules that we laid out last week that came into play this past weekend. But first, Luke, how was your opening March Madness weekend these last 4 days?
Yeah, every year I kind of think to myself, and I'm usually an optimist, I'm like a little bit of a pessimist going into it. I'm like, maybe it's not going to be that fun this year. Like maybe the NFL is going to overtake it and like their postseason is going to be better. But nope, this is every single year. This is the best postseason. It started off with a bang with, of course, Virginia going down to the Paladins?
Yeah, the Paladins. Yeah,
the Paladins. Wild start, of course, and naturally our Wildcats, Arizona, gets knocked off by an Ivy League. So yeah, just came in guns blazing and completely eradicated the thought of it not being the best postseason. It was fantastic all weekend.
Yeah, no, it's genetically engineered for excitement. I mean, the one loss and you're out. Just the pride. You know, a lot of these kids, this is going to be their last game ever if they lose, and just the fact that there's always going to be schools that you have not watched any of during the season that you're like, oh wait, Florida Atlantic's 31-3. Like I didn't know that. Like, you know, they've got the former Pitt player, DeJuan, I'm blanking on his last name, but like he's an assistant coach. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, there's just storylines galore. But yeah, I mean, 4 14-hour days in a row, just watching everything and managing everything and PropSwap related. It's definitely a grind, but there are worse ways to spend 4 days than 3 or 4 games going on at the same time and just excitement wall to wall. But it did make me kind of reminiscent of our Vegas days. I'm sure you remember, but like, we used to work out of the Venetian Sportsbook, and they were very friendly there, and they carved out some seats for us, and we would just basically pitch customers and talk to customers, and it was just the way we kind of grind it out in the early days. But I also have this memory because it's always March Madness is always around St. Patrick's Day. It's always around college spring break. There's always guys trips, and like those long days coupled with just the fact that everyone around you is just like in party mode. And like, I just remember waking up, by like Saturday and Sunday morning, just being like, oh my God, like this week, this is so long. And like going up and just being in the sports book at 7 a.m., 8 a.m. Cause it's an hour earlier, it starts an hour earlier in Vegas. And I don't know if you have fond memories of those days at all.
Then Denver, you're saying an hour earlier than Denver.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think about like the Jay Wright and Candace Parker and Ernie and who's the fourth guy?
Seth Davis.
Like, yeah, like they're sitting there all day. I would imagine sober as birds, just talking about ball. Like you can tell they're exhausted by the end of the day. So it gives me a little bit of solace thinking of them. Now for us when we're not sitting in a sports book all day long, it's a little bit more relaxing. Those, like, you're talking one customer for 45 minutes, you run right into the next guy, you talk to him for another 45 minutes. So like those were super, super long days. You need a cocktail before those. This, I'll of course watch the games. I'll go get a workout in, come back to my condo, put the games back on, so it's not as bad. But every time that the announcers will be like, oh, these are the longest days ever, I think back to those days where we were just literally talking for 14 hours in a row.
Yeah, and it was always funny how we could just, like, on Saturday, for example, we just would slowly start to see the crowd like deteriorate, right? Like everyone's like kind of fresh and ready to go, and then by like 6 p.m., just people are just starting to get like more and more drunk, and like I remember I was getting like contact drunk off of some of these people just because like they reeked of alcohol from drinking all day, and yeah, that definitely wore down on me, but yeah, I mean. It's exciting, and you never know what's going to happen. You always want to like you don't want to skip a game because it's like anything can happen, whether it's an upset or a buzzer beater, or I mean that Gonzaga TCU with like that brutal buzzer beater 3 backdoor cover, or another example was on Sunday early evening. I was paying close attention to that FAU FDU game for multiple reasons, but at the end, I don't know if you saw, but this kid on FAU, the game's over, FDU stopped following, and this FAU kid tries attempts like a 360 windmill dunk, which he didn't make, but if he did, that would have been all over like Sports Center and stuff like that. It was a pretty sick attempt, also kind of not called for, and then, and so they do that, and I'm like, oh, I wonder if like there's going to be some. I always like to watch the post game, little interviews, because it's like, is someone going to say something? Drew Timme drops an F-bomb, but the two head coaches, meet at center court, and they're definitely discussing the thing, right? The FDU coach is probably not pleased, and the FAU coach is probably saying, I'll handle it, but I think your guys were also talking some smack too, or whatever, and they had this like 16 pat exchange where each coach was patting the other one. It was like such a typical sports coach thing to do, where it's like this like, good job, no, you do good, no, you're good job, no. And so I tweeted a video of it, and I had no idea that people were so enamored with head coaches patting each other on the chest, because as of this recording, it's got about 600,000 views on Twitter, and I guess people found that to be amusing.
One of the most popular things you've ever posted on Twitter. My take was that was passive aggressive. Like, I don't think they were saying, "Hey, you did a good job." I think they were probably like, what was coming out of their mouth was "good job," but in reality, it was like "F you," like. We're not friends, and it was like, let me get the last pat on the back to be like, I'm the alpha.
Yeah, no. If you didn't know the context, that's what it seemed like. But yeah, the context is probably like, take care of your players. It's like, no, you take care of your players. Like, like I'll handle it. No, so yeah, but just another reason why like it kind of pays to be watching everything, and why I don't know, at least I feel the need to like. Literally not, I don't know, just making sure I'm watching the end of every game, even the post games, all that stuff.
Yeah, I teared up with the Musselman interview after Arkansas beat Kansas. First of all, I'm putting emotions aside. Like, what an incredible upset. I realized that Bill Self wasn't coaching Kansas, but like for Arkansas to do that off of a team that is, of course, the reigning national champions, like what a job by Eric Musselman. He's the man. Such a good coach, and we've talked about his team a couple. We talked about Musselman on this podcast a couple weeks ago, but that like Deontay Davis kid, like apparently Musselman challenged him at the beginning of the season to like be a better leader, be more vocal, and just typical coach things that you want to bring out the best in their players. And he responded, and he's going to the Sweet 16 and beat Kansas. So he was crying. You could tell like Musselman probably had some tears. Musselman takes his shirt off, looks ridiculous. It's part funny, part kind of laughing at him. But it's to see a coach get that fired up was pretty cool. That was just one of the storylines that hit home.
Yeah, and I'm sure there'll be more tears to come. But moving on, I thought we would kind of touch base on some of those rules that we laid out last week, which, by the way, a lot of positive feedback from the podcast last week. So thank you, everyone who reached out, and thank you, again, everyone who tunes into this every week. But I thought I'd bring up rule number 2 again, which, if you don't remember, it's when an early round upset occurs, look to quickly bet on the other favorites in that region. And this opportunity was presented very early on. The first game of the whole thing, Furman upsets Virginia, who was the number 4 seed in the South region. And so I immediately hopped on Alabama at 7-1 odds, available at the Superbook sportsbook here in Colorado. They are now down to 3.5 to 1. So that bet has already doubled, purely based on the fact that, they won 2 games as a pretty considerable favorite. So that was that. I snapped an action on that one, and you will not see Alabama at 7-1 anymore in this tournament. So yeah, I mean, was there anything that kind of stood out to you in terms of like results? And yeah,
Yeah, kind of under that same umbrella. Like when a team is in control of the game and they're clearly going to win, maybe that's like a 7-point lead with like 2 minutes left, let's say, just as one example, bet their future. So like even though the odds, even though the game has not been finalized, like those futures odds, Michigan State is a prime example. I grabbed Michigan State, I believe it's 60-1. But they are now down to 25-1. I certainly grabbed them at 40-1 during the game, and we'll talk about them later. But they're now down to 25-1. Michigan State is. So just kind of under that same breath, like be checking futures odds, maybe of the team that's going to win, but they haven't yet. And then to your point, also as soon as an upset happens, go bet other futures odds in that same region.
Yep. And obviously price shop too, because I mean, when that Virginia loss happened, Superbook wasn't the first book I looked at. It was probably the fifth book I looked at. And, Alabama was 5-1 here, 5.5-1 there, 6-1 there. It's like, oh, wait, 7-1. Boom. I'm taking that. Definitely, once again, like we said last week, opportunities across the board to be had. I do think those are going to start to tighten up a little more just because there are less teams for the books to focus on. But when there's 50, 60 teams remaining or whatever, they're not going to be able to hop on all of the different futures odds.
Yeah. Just last thing on the price shopping. I mean, just between the two most popular books in the country, DraftKings and FanDuel, Michigan State was 40-1 at DK, but they were like 30-1 or even 25-1 at FanDuel. So like just one example of like the two books that are the largest you would think would be really close odds, but like you're literally getting double the money on a team. So you better, if both those books are legal, and of course all the other books, PointsBet, Superbook, to name a few, Barstool, make sure you have, a couple $100 in each account. You can of course just withdraw it if you don't use it, but have those accounts funded and be ready to fire on it, as soon as these games end, or even if they haven't ended yet, to my point earlier.
Yep. And then, all right, it's been long enough. It is time for me to take my victory lap on Creighton. That was my long shot pick last week. I loved this team 40-1 before the tournament, now down to 10-1. Of course, with a Sweet 16 matchup coming against Princeton, where they are like a 9.5 point favorite, right? A huge favorite. But that brings me back to rule number 4 from last week, which is they are supposed to beat Princeton. And if and when they do, their odds are not going to improve that much. So as much as I love Creighton, and as much as I think you're going to beat the hell out of Princeton, if you want to sell, now would be the time, because they will most likely have a matchup against Alabama in the next round. But if you have a Creighton ticket and they're 10-1 now, and they beat Princeton, and they're a 10-point favorite, but let's say they beat Princeton by like 4 or 5, right? It's like, oh wait, actually maybe they're not as good as we thought. Like these odds are not going to go to 5-1. These odds are probably going to go to 9-1 or 8.5-1. So I just have to kind of bring that up again. And then I guess another looping back in the rule number 2 with Creighton. I popped Creighton again at 40-1. When Arizona, after the Arizona game, when Arizona lost, which was brutal for you and I was able to get Creighton once again at 40-1 at Caesars. So love Creighton, 40-1 to 10-1, 4x on your money. That's exactly what I'm looking for. So while this is not my stake or swap pick, this is just another call out there to say that A, I was right, and B, now would be the time to hop off the Creighton train, in my opinion.
Yeah. So take that one round further. Of course, agree with all that logic. I'd be stunned if they beat Princeton. I really don't think they're that good. I think Arizona came out super flat. I don't think Missouri was that good to begin with. They barely beat Utah. I shouldn't say barely. They beat Utah State, but I wasn't that impressed with Mizzou. I think Princeton caught them sleeping again, but Arizona was totally flat. Like there was nothing positive about that entire basketball game, in my opinion. Do you think they beat Bama?
Creighton?
Yeah.
Look, I think they're really good, but I also think Alabama's very good, and those are two teams that I really like in this tournament. So, gun to my head, I would pick Alabama, but I would say that they're as live as any other team. So look, could Creighton beat Alabama? Yeah, they could. But again, that's why you go for two maybe. If you had two Creighton tickets, you would sell one today, and then hope that they beat Alabama in the Elite Eight and go to the Final Four.
Yeah, agreed.
And then speaking of popping other teams at certain odds, so I thought I would go over a couple sales that happened. One college basketball, one non-college basketball that happened like during all of this madness, and no pun intended there. Late Sunday night, so this is after all of the games were done and the Sweet 16 Masters were set. One of our Sharp Better customers purchased multiple Tennessee championship tickets at 16 and 17 to 1 odds. One of those tickets was a $200 three-leg parlay that included Georgia to win the college football title and Eagles to win the NFC championship. That ticket sold for $1,200, and if it wins, it will collect a little over $20,000. And now at the time, it was sold at like market odds. If you looked around the sports books on Sunday night, Tennessee was about 15, 16 to 1. So it wasn't this crazy, crazy deal compared to where the sports books were, at 11 p.m. Mountain Time Sunday night. Mm-hmm. But when I woke up on Monday morning, was looking at the odds, Tennessee's now down to 10 to 1 or 11 to 1, which is closer to where I thought they should be, given who they play in the Sweet 16 and given who their potential opponent would be in the Elite Eight if they do win. I was surprised 17 to 1 was still there after that. And I wonder if like sports books were like, well, FAU was supposed to win and we were planning on them to win, but it's like still at the end of the day, like they're playing Florida Atlantic, like these should be a big favorite. So I'm not sure if this Sharp Better was buying these Tennessee tickets because he likes the Vols, or just because he knew that the odds were going to drop and he was getting good value at that time.
Yeah, so you're sure that when that sale went down, you checked? Because I remember it was like 1 a.m, so I was just going to bed, and I saw that sale go through. I'm like, that seems like a mistake. Like, that seller was probably caught napping. Like, 17 to 1 seems way too high for a team that's in a bracket filled with, they got Florida Atlantic next. Marquette just lost. Tennessee hasn't looked that good. Like, they got a really easy region left. That region got blown up.
Yeah. So
I'll take your word for it, but I was stunned when that sale went through. And for that large of a price, like, that was an interesting one. Great job on the buyer, in my opinion. Even though if you could have found him at other books, like, fine. But to your point, I think anyone that's been watching these games or looking at the bracket could imagine that come Monday morning, that's going to be, barely above 2 digits.
So on FanDuel, the odds that they had before it went to 11 to 1 was 15 to 1. So I'm fairly confident that when he bought this ticket at 17 to 1 odds or so, they were 15 to 1 at FanDuel. So don't get me wrong, he was getting better than every sports book, but 17 to 1 versus 15 to 1 is not a crazy value, but it did. I mean, when I saw 17 to 1, I'm like, yeah, that's a pretty good number. A little better than market, but when I woke up, I was like, yep, 10 to 1, 11 to 1 across the board, and that guy knew what he was doing.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of that would justify the seller, not posting it for a high price is, like, again, he made it a parlay, right? So he only bet $200. Now, if he had bet like 600, like, would he have sold for 1,200? I would guess not. But with these cross-board parlays, it's like, yeah, like, I bet 200, I'm cashing in, I get to make 6x on my money. And I, commented on the Instagram, like, how many people made 6x on any bet unless you bet on, Fairleigh Dickinson to beat Purdue? But, like, outside of that, I don't think many guys or girls made 6x on a single sports bet. And I realize this is, crossing a few months because he had the Eagles and Georgia, but make 6x on your money and move on to the next bet.
Yeah, and this particular seller, he's done a lot of business with us, like, he is very unemotionally attached to his tickets, right? Mm-hmm. He is making a lot of these bets for the sheer purpose of hitting a couple legs and then selling. So his objective was to sell this entire time. And then you come down to the fact of, like, oh, well, I could have gotten 1,300 or 1350 or 1400. Whatever. It's like this is how I feel with when I have season tickets. Right? I have Golden Knight season tickets, and it's like I try and price them, basically as low as the market is, and it's always like, if the lowest ticket is priced at $90, I'm like, should I go like 89, 88? It's like just price it at like 86 and sell the thing. Don't be sweating over a couple dollars, because if you price it to at 89 and it doesn't sell, then you look back in a couple days and now the lowest ticket is at $79. You're like, great, I tried sweating a couple dollars to, and now I'm going to lose, $15, $16, which I realize is on a much smaller scale. But I think it goes to show you, like, when people are like, oh, he should have held out for more, like what, 1350, like, and then I don't think Tennessee's, crazy world beaters here. I think they will beat FAU, but again, this brings back to my original question: do we think this sharp better, who is very knowledgeable, actually likes Tennessee, or he just was grabbing the value at 17-1?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I do think he was just grabbing value, to answer your question. But I think you started off this topic by saying the seller is just emotionally unattached to this stuff. And great analogy with the season tickets. I of course had a couple seasons doing the same thing. Like, who cares if you lose, quote unquote lose? Like, don't sell it for $12 above market value. Like, cool, it's literally $20 total from the 10 above to selling at 10 below. $20 total. It's a beer at the game, and your downside is obviously unlimited. You can literally, this thing can go to zero. So I think that is, you have to look at these things without your emotions attached. I tell people all the time, the only way I'm betting on Arizona is picking against Arizona, my alma mater. And the only way I'm betting like the Cubs or the Bears is picking against the Cubs or the Bears. Like, don't let yourself get emotionally attached to these sports bets. And it's the tale as old as time. We started this business 8 years ago, and it's going to be true for the next 20.
Yeah. And just last thing, I mean, when he got Georgia and the Eagle, like, they were pretty small favorites. I forget exactly what, but they were pretty small favorites. So again, he was just like, let me throw a couple favorites and then one long shot, and then I'm going to hope that this team gets the Sweet 16, and then I'm going to sell it. Boom, he did it. Mission accomplished. And I don't think he's sweating over $100 here or there. And then, speaking of 3-leg parlays, we had another big sale on Thursday evening. Again, when this went through, I was like, Jesus, people are paying attention to things other than college basketball right now. But if you haven't been following the NBA recently, the 76ers have been on a tear. On March 4th, their championship odds were 16-1. And since then, they have won 8 of their last 9 games. Actually, as we record this, they just lost in double overtime to Da Bulls. And their odds are now down to 9-1 to win the NBA Finals. Last week, a Montana customer, which I don't think I've ever said those.
Shout out
I'm sure I
Montana.
said those words before. A Montana customer listed a $20 parlay that included Georgia to win the title again, Chiefs to win the Super Bowl, which I think he got like plus 650 on that Chiefs leg, and third leg being Sixers to win the championship. On Thursday, that $20 parlay sold for $1,058. Which gave the buyer odds of 12.5-1, which, like I mentioned, is much better than the current 9-1, and a 53x return for the seller. That is how you draw it up.
Incredible. We got Credit Suisse shutting down, getting sold to UBS. We have Silicon Valley Bank shutting down. People potentially are going to lose millions of dollars. We have this guy making 53x on his money in like 2 months. Depends when he made it, but of course Georgia won in January and the Chiefs won in February. So that is a beautiful thing.
Yep. And I'm really rooting for the Sixers, just because I want to see Joel Embiid do well, and I'm tired of seeing the Celtics. Like, I think a Sixers-Bucks Eastern Conference Finals would be super exciting. And then on top of that, I've also got my eyes on there's this other ticket that, has it sold or just, it was listed for sale, has not sold, but this guy, I gotta imagine he's from Pennsylvania. Yeah, his avatar is a guy in an Eagles jersey. He's from Pennsylvania. He has a Phillies to win the NL pennant, Eagles to win the NFC, and a Sixers to win the champion. No, the Eastern Conference parlay. He's got the Phillies special parlay.
Phillies from last season or this upcoming season?
Phillies from last season to win the NL pennant. Eagles to win the NFC from this past season, and the only remaining leg is Sixers to win the Eastern Conference. So it was an all Philly, but like all conference Philly special, which is apparently the right way to do it because Philly loves to get close and then not finish it. But he got over 2,500 to 1 odds on this thing. It's $5 to pay over $12,000. So I've got my eyes on this ticket. It hasn't. It's currently off the market, but I think there would be a lot of fascinating sales if the Sixers do make it deep in the playoffs.
Seriously, so I'm just checking the conference odds. 5 to 1, Sixers are, so that's in the money.
Yeah, so that means it has a current market value of $2,100, and just to reiterate, he bet $5. So, and he got the Phillies at 20 to 1 to win the NL pennant when he made this, and Eagles at 14 to 1 to win the NFC. Wow. Ironically, the Sixers is the shortest of the three at 7 to 1 to win the East. He got definitely room for.
We'll flip back to college basketball in a second, but Milwaukee's odds are plus 125 to win the East in March. That's crazy.
Yeah, they are the Celtics have been blowing it, and Giannis is a beast, and he has the experience. He's got some shooters around him. The Bucks are the best team in the East.
Yeah.
And people they've done it, right? Like it's a lot different.
Yeah, Philly hasn't done it.
Right, exactly. And James Harden really hasn't done it. And so I feel like it's a big difference if talent is even, but one team has been to the finish line, but one team hasn't. Like people bet what they've seen before and what they know to be true. So that's why the Bucks are such a big favorite.
Totally.
But yep. Time to switch back to college basketball. This is March, and so it is time for that part of the show for Stake or Swap. First up, we'll be talking Gonzaga Bulldogs won the conference tournament against St. Mary's, and then had a very exciting win to cap out Sunday night against TCU. Currently 12 to 1 now to win the title. I will go first. I am swapping Gonzaga at 12 to 1. This team was never high on my list. They were 40 to 1 in mid-February. And then before that conference tournament, where the upset St. Mary's, they were 26 to 1. So if I'm holding any tickets above 20 to 1, 30 to 1, I'm selling that right now. They could be underdogs each of the next 4 games if they make it that far. They're currently underdogs to UCLA, and then if they win that, they would have to play, I think, UConn potentially, which they could be underdog, could be more of a coin flip, but I love UConn, and regardless of. Could be Arkansas, but if Arkansas beats UConn, then again that no matter what, that's going to be a dogfight in that Elite Eight, right? Mm-hmm. And then if they win that, they would most likely play either Houston or Texas underdog, and then they're in the championship game where who knows, but they would most likely be an underdog. So the road to the championship is very difficult, and to be 12 to 1 right now, I think that is way too short of odds. While they are the number 1 offense in the country, according to KenPom, they are 75th in defense. Right, they gave up 81 to TCU on Sunday night, and they are not going to keep winning these shootouts. So in comparison, UCLA is 2nd in defense, although they are missing their best defensive player, and UConn is 14th in defense. So. And I realize they could be playing Arkansas. I don't have that number in front of me, and so. At some point their lack of defense is going to come back to bite them, and they're not going to keep just being able to outscore teams in the 80s. So for those reasons, I am swapping Gonzaga. Yeah,
and I'll add another point on there. Big men just do not perform well in the tournament, and Zach Edey was obviously the first casualty of that. So I get all those reasons for sure. I guess, I'll counter with, so I am going to swap. I'm going to stake Gonzaga with the only point being I just don't trust UCLA. Ever since they lost Jalen Clark, their defense has not been as good as they were throughout the whole regular season, and that's what they hang their hat on is defense. They're not a great offensive team. They almost lost Northwestern. UCLA did. Like Northwestern could have won that game. They pushed them to the edge. Did Northwestern pushing UCLA? So literally, I would say that's my only counterpoint is I just don't trust UCLA. Gonzaga's a 2.5-point dog in that game. I think Gonzaga can win that. And I like Mick Cronin. Like I think he's a really good coach. I think he's done a really good job at UCLA. But I don't trust UCLA after that injury. So I'll be staking the Zags.
All right. Well, maybe we'll place a little friendly dinner wager on that game because I like UCLA. Yeah, and to the big man point, I mean, Drew Timme is like one of the smaller big men, but he was getting away with hooks and offensive fouls left and right. I mean, the refs were letting those guys get away with anything in that game. So again, if you get the wrong ref calling some of that stuff, then it's going to be a long night for him. But yeah, I made a joke on Twitter that Zach Edey should basically be taking notes for how you dominate in the paint in the tournament because that was pretty pathetic. That Purdue performance, but we don't have to talk about that.
Yeah, and it started with Tubelis, the Arizona forward, who people were drooling over. He did absolutely nothing in the second half of the Arizona Princeton game. It happened in multiple games that the big men just didn't perform.
Yeah, I also joked on Twitter that Arizona fans were were thanking Purdue for taking the spotlight away from Arizona. Now, I mean, for that first day, all the clips were like, showing that Arizona Princeton upset, whatever. I'm like, great, we're gonna have to watch this for the next 3 weeks. Yeah. But luckily Purdue kind of took that heat off us for not being the worst upset of the tournament.
Yeah. Started with Virginia. Virginia got, slack for losing to Furman. Where is Furman? I looked at it as South Carolina, but who knows where that is. Arizona loses to Princeton. Purdue loses to Fairleigh Dickinson. Kansas loses to their smaller neighbor Arkansas, and then of course Kentucky goes down to Kansas State.
Yeah, I mean the Kansas loss and the Kentucky loss not as I mean you're losing to big conference schools, so that's not as bad. But speaking of Kansas State, their opponent in the Sweet 16 is going to be Michigan State, who we'll talk about next. Michigan State currently 30-1 now to win the title. Luke, you go first. Are you staking or swapping MSU?
Yeah, I'm going to stake this team. So Michigan State's 30-1. They're a 1.5-point favorite against Kansas State. Kansas State is still a huge dog. Kansas State can be found at...
I saw 50-1 at Superbook.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So they're 30-1 at FanDuel. Excuse me, while I looked this up. I thought they're still 30. They're 35-1 DraftKings. I could have sworn I saw them at 50 somewhere. But point being, Michigan State's favored. Other than Tom Izzo's loss to that Middle Tennessee State team, which was like 6 years ago now. He is amazing. This is a top 10 coach in March. He just figures it out, whether it's game planning, motivating his players. Like he just consistently is doing this tournament at the best of his ability and gets his teams just totally ramped up, tons of energy, and he did it again. So I will back Michigan State. Their next matchup would probably be Tennessee. Tennessee got pushed by Louisiana Lafayette, so they're beatable. And then, if Florida Atlantic does win, I would think Michigan State would be favored against Florida Atlantic. I doubt they'd be favored against Tennessee, but to my point, like Tennessee is not playing as well. Tennessee's just inconsistent. Like when they play well, they're one of the best teams in the country. When they play poorly, they're not. It's just one of those teams that just can't play consistent basketball for weeks on end, and they didn't look that strong last week. Of course, who knows how they're going to play next week. It's March Madness for a reason, but for those reasons, I will stake the Spartans at 30-1.
Yeah, I will stake Michigan State 30-1 as well. But the caveat being, this East region has been my kryptonite. If you look at my bracket, I mean, it looks like you put bullet holes through this region. I liked Duke. And then like my second choice by default was Purdue, even though I didn't like them that much, but just their stats were great. But to your points, I don't like usually backing up big men, and their guards were freshmen, which I talked about last week. And so, you look at my bracket, I don't have any of these possible teams making it. But then the other stat I kind of gave out last week was that was basically how Kansas State and Baylor both lost in the first round of their conference tournament, and that typically does not bode well. So I am surprised that Kansas State has made this far, but I'm going to stick with that stat about, hey, if you lose your first round game, you're not winning the championship. And I realize you could still win this game, but not win the championship. But don't like Kansas State. I don't like Rick Barnes at Tennessee. I mean, if you can't get out of the first round or the second round with Kevin Durant and DJ Augustine on your team when he was at Texas, I don't think you're a good tournament coach. Couple that with Tom Izzo being a great tournament coach, the whole narrative with the Michigan State shooting. I think these kids are playing inspired, and it's never a good feeling to bet against Tom Izzo, Michigan State in March. So for those reasons, I will stake Michigan State as well. I mean, I may even look at them to win the region odds. But yeah, I mean, if you can get 30-1, and then if you do make it to the Final Four, I'd be selling at that point. But yeah, I mean, Michigan State to win the region
plus 270 at FanDuel.
Plus 270. Yeah, I mean, you might be able to find a little better than that. Let me see. You say plus 270? Yeah, I mean, you can get plus 300 at DraftKings on Michigan State to win the region. So I may look at that as well. So that will do it for this week's episode. I can't wait for these next slate of games. This is when it gets really interesting. Sweet 16 Elite 8 is by far our busiest 4 days of the year, because this is make or break time. This is when things values start going up. So be making sure to be checking the PropSwap website and app. Get in now, and then be flipping all weekend long. So thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to subscribe, leave a rating, and we will talk to you next week.